Good morning. It's great to be here. I was just thinking, I've had a couple of days of looking around Istanbul, and it's amazing. I mean, just those layers of history here is just filled with stories. And of course, that's what we're here to talk about today. But I was just noticing too, the culture here seems kind of relaxed and laid back, and in many ways it reminds me of Australia. Australia is very relaxed and laid back. I know, who here has been to Australia? Got a couple? Any been to Melbourne? Because that's where I'm from, Melbourne. Yes, we got a match. Fantastic. You have to come down. We want to see as many people as possible. So today we're going to do a masterclass around this whole area of oral storytelling. That's what I'm particularly interested in, is the stories you tell off the top of your head, no PowerPoint slides, for leaders, for sellers, so that they can make their ideas stick, so they can influence and persuade. And to do that, I thought what we could do is I would share a couple of examples, just to give you a sense of how this might look in real life. And then we'll jump into some real detail on how you do it. And this little handout here is sort of just designed for you to take notes, and it has most of the diagrams that I'm going to show you today, which is sort of like the base material for what I'm going to take you through. Now, for me, I think I sort of started in this field in a slightly different way than most people in the branding field. I actually started off in IBM in the late 1990s. And in IBM, they had this group that did culture change projects. And the culture change projects were very large projects, but it was taking this idea that imagine if an organization was complex and messy and there was no right answer. How would you make progress? How would you work out what to do, what to reinforce, and what to get rid of? And we came up with the idea that the best way to really tackle those types of messy problems was to go and collect stories, the stories that people tell in organizations. And one of the things we'll do today is I'm going to help you be really good at spotting oral stories, right? And that's one of the key capabilities you'll need to be able to do this work. But when you're in organizations and you have this knowledge of where these stories are, you realize that stories are absolutely everywhere. They've been told over and over again. Some of them are very tiny stories, and others are sort of mythological stories that sort of stick with the organization, really affect the culture. So in that time in IBM, we had to come up with techniques to go and collect stories, right? And so we learned a whole bunch of things from anthropology and ethnography, and we became very good at collecting stories and making sense of them and helping people sort of see the patterns that were in the stories. I jumped out of IBM in 2004 and started Anecdote, and if you like, we went from sort of looking at stories as something that people tell in organizations to helping people find and tell their own stories as a communication technique. And that was a big change for us. So we're going to be looking at this latter element of how do you share those stories. Now, there's two examples I want to share with you. And the first one comes from a hotel group called Intercontinental Hotels. So Intercontinental Hotels, they're probably the largest hotel group by room numbers, though there is one that's larger. Can anyone guess what the larger one is? It's a sort of a new Airbnb. Did anyone say that? Yes, Airbnb. The interesting thing about Airbnb is that, of course, they don't own any of their hotels. And here we have, the old-style Intercontinental, which has some similarities, but again, these are the sort of a big conglomerate, if you like, that moves fairly slowly. But the thing that they do, and this is the thing that I learned working with them, is that an Intercontinental doesn't actually own the hotel, right? What they do is they franchise the look and feel, essentially the brand, the Intercontinental brand, to hotel owners. And they might be, rich Indonesian billionaires or superannuation funds, these owners of these hotels, and so they have a sales force who have to do these multi-million-dollar bids to try to sell the franchise to the hotel owner. The problem they faced is this, is that they have a whole bunch of brands, and when you go and talk to the branding section of their organisation, they'll show you slide decks which have all the descriptions of the brand and the demographics, and these things are probably 150 slides deep. Unfortunately, the sellers couldn't really understand it, right? They couldn't articulate the difference between a Crowne Plaza and an Intercontinental, or any one of the other brands that they have, a Candlewood Suites, for example. And so our job was to help them find stories that illustrated the different brands, illustrated them in action. And so it was the project really was around Asia Pacific and North Africa. And we would go and talk to essentially the sellers to find out some of the stories they would tell to help convince someone to go an Intercontinental approach versus, say, Crowne Plaza. And then once we found these good stories, we then had to help the other sellers learn those stories and just get comfortable in telling them. And so they range from sort of very emotional stories about, a young fellow who, his father, you would always take him to an Intercontinental as a kid. And so one day when he, had grown up, became an adult, he decided that he would want to buy himself an Intercontinental, and that was actually the if you like, the trigger for him to go down that path and choose that brand. Totally irrational, totally to do with an emotional connection that he had as a child. All the way to the other end of the spectrum, where there was a hotel in India. They had a really low occupancy rate. It was an occupancy of about 50%, which is the sort of occupancy that you go out of business on, right? They were not an Intercontinental Hotels hotel, but they were convinced to take on a Crowne Plaza, but they resisted because Crowne Plaza and Intercontinental don't do any advertising, right? Whereas all the other franchises that were coming in were promising these amazing advertising platforms. They said, we don't need to do any advertising. We actually do everything just through our website. And the fact that the Intercontinental Hotels Group sort of reward system, if you're a member, is all you need to actually increase your occupancy rate. Well, eventually they agreed. They changed the look and feel. They set it up as a Crowne Plaza. They went from 50% up to 75% in 3 months, right? And so it's just to have these little stories, that they could tell at the right period of time. So that's just one example. Now, I want to give you a totally different example, if you like. This company is a new company in the US. It's called Perch. And Perch is a high-end, very high-end home appliance and plumbing business, right? In fact, they're now making a connection between what they're doing, and they're comparing it to Tiffany's and Apple stores. Right, that's just how high-end these are. I'll show you some pictures in a minute. But because they want to create such an amazing experience for people when they walk into these stores, they spend, a whole week of all their employees, and their employees include, they have executive chefs, so they're selling ovens and things for your kitchen. So they have executive chefs in the shop. They have barista in the shop, so they have all these different roles. It's actually kind of interesting. When you go in to Perch, say, for example, you're looking for an oven, a new oven, you can come up to the executive chef and say, I'm interested in this oven here, and the chef will say, oh, so what do you like to cook? And you might say, oh, look, I really quite like, I like a curry, a chicken curry, actually. And goes to the fridge, he pulls out the chicken, he pulls out the spices, and they literally cook the curry right in front of you. I mean, that's the sort of type of place this is. But these guys, they knew they had to really bond this group of people who were working in this environment so that they had not only a connection and understood each other and where they were from, but they also wanted to make sure that they could tell the stories that would help the organisation sort of go through their sales process. And their sales process is a very simple one. It starts off with dream, play, choose. So you go out, you dream about what's possible in your house. You get to play with everything. Anything that looks like you can turn it on and water comes out of it, you can turn it on and water comes out of it. And then eventually you choose, and of course then they handle all of the front end. This is the Chicago store. I was there just a couple of weeks ago. We've sort of been helping them with the way in which they use these stories, about helping them also learn which stories, find and tell some good stories for the organisation. But you sort of get an idea of the type of style. This one here is my favourite room in Perch, right? They have a room, they call it the sanctuary room, and it's kind of like a spa, right? And you can sort of see all these are shower heads, right? And in fact, the shower heads go out to about here. You know, it's a really long room. And what you can do is you can stand right at the end, you can take off all your clothes, and you can turn on all the showers and just walk through and go, oh yeah, I like that shower, that's good, and keep walking. So you get to choose, you know, this is an actual experience, right? You'll never forget this when you choose a shower at Perch. This one here, look at this bath is pretty amazing. The water actually comes out of the ceiling to fill this bath up. So in both cases, they had to really look at how they get their brand ideas translated into stories for the front line to be able to tell. In this case, you have a whole bunch of people in a store environment. With Intercontinental, it's people out in the field. You're sort of essential, the salespeople that you normally work with, finding and telling those stories. So let me just take you through what the sort of things, if that's the setup, I wanted to share with you the types of things that we would do with an organisation to help them build this narrative ability.